Hey everyone, and welcome to This Explainer. Over the course of a 30-year career in actuarial science and risk management, I have literally spent thousands of hours building predictive models. I'm talking forecasting probabilities, calculating the exact cost of managing deficits, the whole shebang. But recently, I came across a piece of source text that completely stopped me in my tracks. It is incredibly brief, yet profoundly deep. What initially looks like a simple philosophical quote is, actually scratch that, it's more like the ultimate risk assessment formula for a fulfilling life. As someone who absolutely loves mapping out complex, high-level risk management concepts into clear, digestible structures, I found this breakdown just brilliant. So today, we're going to deconstruct this formula piece by piece to see exactly how these variables interact. Okay, let's dive into this. The text we are exploring today reads exactly as follows. Success is getting what you want. Happiness is wanting what you get. Wow, I really want you to take a second and let that sink in. It serves as this incredibly stark, contemplative baseline for everything we're going to model out today. Instead of viewing this as just some philosophical riddle, think of it as an equation of personal fulfillment containing two very distinct variables. One variable represents success, which relies heavily on external probability and market conditions. And the other variable? That represents happiness, relying entirely on internal baseline adjustments and risk mitigation. So to really grasp this, we're looking at the core philosophy. We're going to break down this equation into two opposing operational models. It's kind of like balancing a high-yield, extremely high-risk investment portfolio against the completely guaranteed security of safe-held assets. Now, what absolutely fascinates me about this text is its sheer efficiency. 12. That's it. That is the exact number of words it takes to completely map out this predictive model for human satisfaction. In the world of risk modeling, the absolute most elegant, robust models always use the fewest possible variables. 12 words. And there is zero wasted space here. Every single verb, every single pronoun is doing some serious heavy lifting. It's just a perfect example of how structural efficiency can deliver a massive analytical payload, accurately forecasting the tension between striving for something and actually being satisfied with it. Let's move on to the mechanics of success. Here, we'll build our understanding of the first pillar and see how success functions purely as an external forecasting target. All right, we've isolated this specific definition right here. Success, getting what you want. Notice how the text defines success entirely around the external act of acquisition. It's not about internal joy or fuzzy feelings of fulfillment. In pure risk management terms, success is defined by closing a deficit. You're currently sitting at a value of 0 for a specific desire, and success is simply the transaction of moving that value to 1. It is a highly volatile pursuit simply because it relies so heavily on external factors and probabilities that are, quite frankly, often completely out of your control. If we look at the precise chronological sequence of success as dictated by the text, we see a very specific structural flow. Step 1 is wanting, identifying a gap or a deficit in your portfolio. Step 2 is getting, the actual execution of a strategy to bridge that gap. You forecast a future where you possess something you currently lack, and you put your capital, your time, and your energy at risk to get it. Because this sequence requires relying on probabilities like market conditions, timing, and, other people, it is an inherently risky, high-volatility path to fulfillment. Which leads us to an inevitable, almost uncomfortable question. But what happens after you get it? In risk forecasting, we talk a lot about tail risk or depreciating returns. Once the transaction is complete and the asset is acquired, your baseline resets. Sure, your net worth on paper might be higher, but that initial thrill of the acquisition, it wears off. So, what happens to your long-term forecast when the engine of success achieves its target, but the daily maintenance of that success remains? This built-in tension perfectly sets up our transition to the second half of the equation. And that brings us to the mechanics of happiness. Here, the source text shifts our focus, making a brilliant pivot from the volatility of external acquisition to a bulletproof risk mitigation strategy of internal contentment. Let's clearly define happiness exactly as the text states it. Happiness is wanting what you get. Look at how this fundamentally contrasts with our previous definition. If success is trying to manipulate the external dataset to match your internal forecast, happiness is simply updating your forecast to match your current dataset. It's all about recalibrating your baseline. And because this requires absolutely zero external acquisition, the probability of achieving it is technically 100%. Assuming, of course, you can master the mindset required to actually execute it. And this brilliantly illustrates the absolute genius of the text's structure. Look at the chronological action here. It flips. This inversion is an ingenious hedge against risk. Step 1 is getting, basically accepting the reality of what you already have, which carries a 0% acquisition cost. Step 2 is wanting, actively assigning value to that reality. By doing this, you're yielding the maximum possible return on assets you already hold without exposing yourself to any new external volatility. How great is that?
So this brings us to what we can call the great inversion. These two halves operate as a closed-loop system, perfectly mirroring each other to create a holistic model of the human experience.
Now, what's really interesting about this slide is how the exact same variables are used, but their sequence is completely reversed. It's such an elegant formula. The text uses the exact same data points, but simply by changing the operational order, it yields a completely opposite human experience. Getting what you want mirrors perfectly into wanting what you get. One pushes you outward into the unpredictable risk of the world, and the other anchors you inward into the guaranteed safety of the present moment. The logic of the source material boils down to this. The formula flips. By simply swapping the operational order of two variables, getting and wanting, you are shifting from the high-risk endeavor of changing your circumstances to the low-risk endeavor of changing your relationship to those circumstances. It is literally the ultimate form of long-term forecasting for personal peace. It shows us that true stability isn't necessarily a different set of assets. It's a different way of valuing the portfolio you already have right in front of you. Which leaves us with this final, truly provocative thought directly derived from the text. I want you to take a second and reflect on your own personal life strategy. Are you heavily leveraged in the risky business of getting what you want, or are you investing in the stability of wanting what you get? Because as these 12 brilliant words have shown us today, a truly well-forecasted life probably requires a diversified portfolio of both. Thank you so much for joining me for this explainer, and I really hope this analytical breakdown gives you a valuable new lens for your own risk and reward calculations today.